I was traveling down a dark, muddy back road surrounded by tall trees, and the moon wasn't shining due to the overcast skies of the approaching back end of the hurricane. Traveling down a dark, muddy, swampy road in the middle of fucking nowhere. The sound of frogs, gators, and other reptilian beasts. My friends, Jake and Bobby, were smoking meth, and Brittany and Kirsten were smoking marijuana and drinking. We were having a great party traveling down this long stretch of road. We came up to this mansion with paint peeling off, leaves covering the marble steps, and giant evergreen and oak branches hovering over the driveway just beyond the stone wall gate. The stench of rotting flesh creeping up from beneath the tall bushes. My friends and I began arguing whether we should call the police or just leave without saying a word. My friends were high as a kite, and my friends had drugs on them, and were scared to have drugs on them if the cops showed up. While my friends and I were debating whether or not we should contact the police like normal people would do, but because we are not normal, we are low-life, hippie, drug-addict college bums, suddenly we hear the sound of a chainsaw revving up. Brittany let out a loud scream, like a childish, "I'm so spooked, because I'm a retarded stoned bitch," type of scream. "Shut the fuck up, you stupid bitch," Kirsten demanded as she forced her to kneel down behind the front tire of the car. "I'll check it out," Bobby said in his brave tone, like he thought he was the hardest, most badass motherfucker in the world. "Calm down there, Mike Tyson," I mocked. "Then what do we do, pussy boy?" Bobby answered with his over-the-top tough guy, alpha male trying to show off in front of Kirsten because she won't fuck him tone. "If you get killed, Bobby, then you won't be able to take me out to dinner," Kirsten said playfully and seductively. The sound of the chainsaw fired up again, getting louder and louder, sounding more and more like the creeping guitar of a death metal song. For a brief moment, I imagined the most horrific murders in American history could have happened just behind those doors. Some hillbilly backwoods cannibal motherfuckers, and they're just murdering people and eating them like steak. I imagined bodies in the freezer. We ran to the door as we heard the rumble of thunder, and the sprinkling of raindrops fell from the sky. The eye of the storm had passed, and the rain and wind were about to come in full effect. As we were hiding from the rain inside, we saw this big, 6-foot-something fat-ass motherfucker dragging the body of some skinny blonde woman. "Oh, fuck, I think he killed that bitch," Brittany murmured in fear. "Yeah, I think Brittany is right. He probably raped that poor woman and cut her up into tiny fucking pieces," Kirsten added. We were cornered by 4 men in black raincoats. The men brutally harassed Brittany, and one even commented on how he wanted to rape her. Kirsten shouted, "Get your hands off of her, you piece of shit!" The 4 men looked at us with evil in their eyes, the flash of lightning illuminating their faces, their demonic smiles of jagged and rotten teeth with bits of human flesh between the gingivitis and plaque. The fat man from before wallows back over. "Come see the house of evil, for the devil lived just beyond those doors. Pray not, my child. God can't save you from this cozy piece of private hell." Then the fat man yells for his wife. The fat man's wife comes out, a 40-year-old prostitute with leather, sun-tanned skin and a crappy piss-yellow bleach blonde job. Holding a knife in her hand, she waves it around. "Dinner is done." She cackles as she turns her ass and flashes her husband, the fat man, and he smacks her ass, leaving a handprint across her bare ass. Strangely, despite being paranoid that I may fucking die, I felt my dick flinch in my pants. Oh my fucking god, I thought to myself. My perverted fantasies went away when my friend Jake was rifle-butted in the back of the skull with an AR-15, blood just leaking out of the back of his head, mixing with the rain. We are then led into the house, and there are strange paintings of 18th century men and women. The place resembled a mental institution. Red lights in rooms and cameras in some rooms, some of the most horrific acts of violence taking place in these rooms. Every horrible, depraved crime imaginable taking place. Screams and cries of agony and despair echoes through the downstairs. Upstairs, everything is cozy and looks like the palace of kings, a politician's wet dream come true, away from the filth and depravity of lesser humans, sitting above it all to pretend nothing is happening just beneath your feet, that you trample upon the lowly and frail midnight traveler in search of shelter from the storm, the devil incarnate sitting in his dark office, selling the suffering of men and women and children, your criminal scum followers hanging on to your every word. Speak, and they shall hear you. Demand, and they shall obey you. O dark one sitting in your tower that you have built on the decay of mercy and the desire for misery. Now, of course, I know you're not the literal devil from the Bible, as such a thing would be absurd, and I can't assume to know of the existence of such a being without ever experiencing all of God's glorious and splendid treasures. God is not here with me tonight in this nightmarish house of horrors and pagan animality taking place. I must have spent several months in captivity, being beaten and forced to watch Kirsten brutally beaten and raped over and over again, crying out to the heavens, asking God to grant her death. Despite being horribly broken, Kirsten found comfort in the mercy of Jesus Christ, praying the mystical Lord and Savior would take her soul away from this demonic cult of murderers and rapists alike. All the praying in the world never stopped the violence, and one day, as Kirsten was being brutalized, she gave her final breath, and she rested her head one last time. I was then forced to bury her in the backyard like nothing more than a dead rodent. They pissed on her dead body and laughed hysterically, then poured gasoline on the body and set her ablaze as they murmured and moaned as if they were praying. The fat man comes out and wiggles his fat finger at me, and I am shoved in the back to obey his command. You, sir, are free to leave these grounds forever. Speak not of our majestic Lord and all of his gifts of misery and suffering. You, sir, do not desire pleasure, so you do not belong amongst those that do. We have no will to do violence to you, and you have not what it takes in your soul to become one with Baal. After this, my head is bagged, and I remember traveling for a while at high speeds, sometimes very bumpy. Then my head was unbagged, and I was shoved out with my arms tied behind my back. The police found me, and they questioned me. I told them of the house where the devil and his demons live, and they gasped and awed at the pure terror I endured. The police managed to shut down the murder house. The house was ran by a wealthy businessman that had lost his wife and kids in an accident months ago. The man moved to the mansion and hired locals from the trailer parks to do as he commanded, and he provided them with all of the drugs and money that they'd ever need. The wealthy man taught them to use computers and told them that nothing is too far. Destroy the lives of those that aren't like you. He also taught them of some strange abstract religion that he probably made up himself. It seemed to be a mixture of Satanism, voodoo, and other occult religions and some pagan folklore mixed with Gnostic ramblings. The wealthy man was convicted for every single crime, and the members of his cult pled insanity. This story still gives me chills, and I haven't spoken of it in a while. This is a long story and needs extensive backstory, so please bear with me. So flash forward to high school. I wasn't the most social guy in school. I had my really close friends, but other than that I would classify myself as a loner. I had really bad acne, which affected me a lot when meeting new people, and I was very addicted to World of Warcraft. So it was a Friday night, classic raid night, in vanilla World of Warcraft. About 2 hours before the raid, my best friend that I grew up with, let's call him T, called me. He's like, "Yo, bro, I'm meeting up with 2 women later tonight. Let's drink and hang out with these women." It was one of those classic fork in the road moments. Be a nerd and blow another Friday night playing a video game, or go out with my best friend and see if I can finally lose my virginity. Before I get to the next part of the story, I need to give some backstory on T. T was nothing short of a boss, and I truly looked up to him. He is a really good-looking guy, and is extremely intelligent. I'm not understating this. He's the type of guy when he walks into a room, all the women just gravitate towards him. But T has a dark side. Even though he has everything going on for him, it was never good enough. He got expelled from the school we both went to for having a couple grams of marijuana, aka just trying to flex, and got caught by a teacher. So he was sent to another school about 30 minutes away from me. Nothing changed, and it actually got far, far worse. He became the guy. He started fucking all the hot chicks, and became a massive drug dealer. He supplied about 4 or 5 high schools and colleges in the area, and was for sure on the radar of the law and other rivals. So after playing mental ping pong for about 30 minutes, weighing out all the options, potentially get laid, drunk, or nerded up like usual, I finally said fuck it, count me in for tonight, T. I bribed my brother $20, and he agrees to raid for me, and the night begins. T picks me up from my place and greets me with a big smile and says, "We're getting laid tonight, brother." I'm like, "Whatever, bro. We'll see." I'm very used to T over-exaggerating, so I quickly asked, "When are we meeting up with these women?" It's about 9:30 p.m. at this point. Under his breath, he says, "Around 1 a.m. I'm like, what the fuck are we supposed to do for 3.5 fucking hours? T pulls out a bottle of Bacardi 151 with the metal grate and passes it to me. Thankfully, I had been drinking hard that year, so my tolerance was decent. We head to this awesome park to burn time and start passing the bottle back and forth. We catch up on life, and we're about 6 out of 10 drunk at this point. It's around 11:30ish. So, with an hour and a half still to burn before we are supposed to meet up with said women, T says, "Let's roll to Taco Bell. We can get some food and sober up." At this point, I'm drunk, and we have some time to burn. So what the hell, let's head to Taco Bell. As most degenerates know, Taco Bell is open late, and the one we went to is located in a shopping center. No surprise, around 12 a.m., there are no cars whatsoever in the parking lot, except for the workers of Taco Bell. T rolls up to buy his food, and we just sit outside the parking lot of Taco Bell while he eats. While T is eating, I snag a cigarette and get some fresh air. As I puff away on a Marlboro Light, a white van rolls up with tinted windows with no license plate. The van parks to the west of our car about 50 feet away in this empty parking lot. The lights outside and inside the van instantly turn on and off, and no one gets out. I keep smoking, but I don't think much of it. I mean, we're essentially doing the same thing, but a car with no license plate was obviously weird. I get back into T's car and I start getting a really uneasy feeling about this van. At this point, I have sobered up a little bit, and I just keep eyeing down this van. Something doesn't feel right. It chose to park 3/4 of the way into this parking lot with a perfect view of our car. I turn to T and tell him it's time to leave. This is where the backstory comes into play. As I mentioned, T is very deep into this point and was at the height of his drug dealing career. So that exact thought was in the back of my mind when this van was parked inconspicuously. This next part is not exaggerated in the slightest. T turns on his headlights to his car to leave, and I shit you not, I almost instantly, after our lights are on, the white van turns their lights on. My stomach dropped to the floor at this point. We are both freaking out. T knows he could be busted by the police at any point, and that's not even considering all his rivals and people he's fucked over. So right when we see the light turn on from the van, we turn ours off. And no fucking joke, the van turns their lights off to mimic our reaction. T reaches to the back seat of his car and pulls out a backpack with a weapon in it. I can't believe this is actually going down. At this point, I'm inching on crying. This is obviously no coincidence. We were followed to this shopping center. We sat paralyzed in fear and dripping in sweat for the next 10 minutes, waiting to see if the van would move. It did not. T starts mumbling to himself. This might be a goon squad that was hired to hunt me down. I'm speechless to that comment. I was a normally unsocial kid who loved sports and video games, and now I'm in this terrible and possibly life-threatening situation. At this point, I really wish I had just stayed home and played World of Warcraft. No potential sex is worth the heart attack I'm currently going through. I felt extremely nauseous, and I'm soon close to throwing up. Is this actually happening, or am I dreaming? This doesn't feel like the police. They wouldn't go through this type of charade. They would turn on their lights and arrest us by now. I can't stand this demented showdown we are currently in. I'm on the verge of a mental breakdown and tears are rolling down my face. I turn to T and tell him to turn on his lights one more time. Almost like clockwork, the van flicks on their lights. But this time was very different. I was able to see multiple shadows of hooded men in the van. I turn to T and tell him to fucking book it out of here. I've never seen someone go 0 to 60 out of a shopping center before, but you can bet your ass we did. T turns his headlights on while exiting the shopping center and sees the van following us. We start cutting down side roads for the next 5 minutes. Thankfully, no one is following us anymore. At this point, I'm just staring at T and ask, "What the fuck was that, bro?" T says with a weak voice, "I have no idea other than what you know. What I do, drug dealing." We take a deep breath. We hit the bottle some more. The next 20 minutes we sat in silence and came to grips with almost being involved in a sting operation, robbed by rivals, or even worse. Once my heart rate dropped back to normal, we finally headed out to meet the women. T and I never spoke of that moment ever again, and to this day, the thought of that night still chills me to the core. Scary men in the white van. Let's not cross paths ever again. This particular story is the first of them, and will probably be quite lengthy because it took place over the span of a year. At the time, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, living with my mother in a small apartment, and my grandmother lived in the apartment below ours. We lived in the middle of a not-so-great town, but I loved being outdoors, and I had a lot of older male cousins who lived with my grandmother on and off. They would come out and keep an eye on me for the most part while my mother was busy. I don't remember a lot of the details, but it was summertime, and I went next door to my cousin Leah's house to play. They let us out to play alone for some reason. which I wasn't technically allowed to do because I figured I wasn't technically home, and that was a home rule. Kid logic, LOL. While we were in the alley behind our apartments, an older boy, probably around 15 or 16 years old, stumbled up to us, and I remember the immense smell of alcohol that radiated off of him. My little ass froze. The teenager starts wobbling back and forth and starts screaming in my face, "Where the fuck is my money? I told you I needed my motherfucking money back, you little bitch. I need my money." So this dude's screaming at a child some nonsense about this borrowed money, and I'm absolutely terrified, locked into one spot and crying. Leah comes to her senses and yanks me away by the arm, and we take off towards my grandmother's house, which was safer than her own, since there really wasn't much supervision on her parents' end. The whole time the boy just stood and stared as we ran. So we tumble in the back door crying and relive it to my family over and over again, till my cousins decide to scope out the area. He wasn't found, and I didn't have the best description in the first place. Being young and terrified, my mom even took me to a party up the alley where we had suspected he came from, but he was either hiding or had left, so I was unable to identify him. So the boys come out and watch us, and Leah ends up spending the night. Cut to bedtime, and we were in the bathroom brushing our teeth and goofing off. We had a tiny bathroom, so the toilet, sink, and window were pretty much crammed into one corner. Suddenly, someone starts screaming in my backyard. Because of the town and family I grew up in, we assumed it was a fight between my neighbors and my cousins, or just between my cousins. Both happened pretty frequently, but being the little gossips we were, we turned straight to the window and settled ourselves to watch. Only, it wasn't any of them. It was the drunk teenager from earlier, and he was waving something in his hand, still screaming about the non-existent borrowed money. When the light finally hit the object he had been brandishing, Leah screams, "He has a gun!" Immediately we drop to the ground, screaming and crying, and unable to form coherent sentences. My mom swoops in, shuts the blinds, and ushers us down to my grandmother's, where everyone erupts into chaos. The whole night was spent giving statements to the police, calling uncles, and generally just trying to calm Leah and I down because we are in absolute hysterics. He was never found, and life was finally normal. Till school started. My teachers and the principal were informed of the situation beforehand, but nothing prepared me for the day, mid-4th grade year, when I walked out of elementary school to find this boy and his friends sitting across the street, where they weren't technically on school grounds. I tried to justify it. Maybe he had a little sibling or something. He was just hanging out. But I knew in my heart he wasn't waiting for me. I tried to walk home, but as soon as I would walk in one direction, him and the other group of teenagers would match it from across the street till I shifted directions again, and then they'd follow suit. Not even a block from the school, I made an executive decision to bolt back the way I came and tell a teacher. All hell broke loose again, and more police, but the kid was smart. When I ran, he'd taken off as well, and he was again not found. My mom started picking me up and dropping me off to school after that, so things quieted down quite a bit. But there were still times in the couple-minute window I'd been standing alone when I would see him standing across the street just watching. The last incident, I never even connected to this situation until years later. He had stopped showing up at my school almost as abruptly as he had started. I eventually begged, pleaded, argued, and cried enough for my mom to start letting me walk home with Leah again. In hindsight, it was a really terrible idea, but I was a really spoiled kid. One afternoon, I split off from the group of kids Leah and I had been walking with and headed towards the apartment. Because it was an apartment building, the entrance was set up kind of oddly. The first door you entered basically just led to a second door, which then took you to a hallway where directly to the right was my grandmother's apartment door, and straight ahead was my mom and I's door. When I approached the entrance, I noticed the first door was open. Okay, whatever. It's not unusual for my cousins to have left it open, so I stepped in, took 2 steps forward, and went to open the second door. This door was open as well. Now, that was weird. I didn't know why at the time, but my grandmother used to be adamant about shutting the door because my older cousin smoked marijuana and she didn't want the neighbors to smell it and call the cops. I ignored it again and continued walking down the hallway when I reached my apartment door to find it standing wide open. My instincts finally kicked in, and I bolted. Nobody was at my grandmother's house at the time, so I had a neighbor go up and check the apartment out. No sign of forced entrance. Nothing was stolen. Nothing even rummaged through. I can't prove that it was him. Hell, we didn't even think he was an option back then, because he had finally left me alone. But only my mother and myself had keys, and if it would have been my cousins breaking in, they would have stolen anything of value to feed their addictions. The door had been closed and locked up until the point of my grandmother leaving, so it wasn't an accident. I forgot to lock the door scenario. But in any case, guy who stalked me during elementary school, let's not meet again. I just came out of a relationship and felt like a bit of casual dating will be fun. So I went on to Tinder. I made it clear to a few people I actually matched with and spoke to that I did not want anything serious, just a dinner date or a pub night here and there. I matched with a really cute guy. Let's call him Pete. He had just moved to my city and also wasn't looking for anything serious. He just wanted to meet some people and see some local spots. The first night that we met up at a well-known Topaz bar, I chose this place because I had a few friends there that were waitresses and the bar staff, so I felt safe meeting a stranger here. He was on time. We had nice chats, really cool guy on first impression. We spoke about work, to which he responded that he's a software developer, but he's just starting his freelancing career. We spoke about where he stays now, that he's moved up here, and he said that he's sharing a place with some friends. Rent is quite pricey in this city, so it made sense to me. He asked where I live, and I told him that I'm lucky to even have my own bedroom apartment and quite a nice and popular part of town, mostly thanks to my parents that helped me save and gave me a portion of the deposit money for my 21st birthday, which I invested and grew into. I had enough to put down on a decent deposit. He then offered to drop me off at home, but I said no, I'd prefer to Uber home by myself. He asked if this was because I was going to meet someone else after him, and I laughed, because I generally thought this was a joke. The next time I saw Pete was about 3 days later. He said that he knew it was fast, but he actually couldn't stop thinking about me and he wanted to see me again. This time we met at a different restaurant, also one I chose because I went to school with the owner and knew all of the staff pretty well. The place is a little bit more pricey, and he got super annoyed with me for ordering as much as I did. I couldn't understand why, since I insisted on paying for my own stuff both times we met. That night, same story. Let me drop you off at home, please. Again, I said no. While we were in the middle of this conversation, he gets a call. He stepped away, but I could hear a fair amount. No, I'm not going to stay with you again. Yeah, I'm with her. Don't worry about it. Okay? I'll be home soon. So now I think he's chatting to his roommate or maybe his mom, but I don't ask. He comes back to our table. Please, I insist. Bad things happen to women that Uber home this late by themselves. I'd feel better if I dropped you off. Not having the energy to argue, I tell him fine, and I put my address into his GPS. As soon as he got home, he messages me and tells me he'll be picking me up in the morning to go for a picnic. I reply that I actually have cleaning to do, but again he insists that he'll see me at 10. Come 10 a.m. the next morning, best believe he's right outside my apartment. I get into his car, and he leans over to kiss my cheek. I notice that his breath stinks. Obviously, I'm a little grossed out. We have our picnic, and it's quite nice. He tried to kiss me a few more times, but I avoided it with everything in me. By about 4 p.m., I tell him that I really want to go home. The park that we went to is about an hour-and-a-half drive from my apartment, so I couldn't really Uber back home because it would cost a fortune. He agrees it's time to go, so we get in his car, and we are off. I fall asleep in the car on the drive back, and when I woke up, he asked if we should finish the rest of the bubbly we got up in my apartment. I said to him that I don't want to, and he just snaps. Something along the lines of, "What are you hiding from me? Just be honest. Why are you so desperate to keep me out of your fucking apartment?" I was so confused. I actually just kept quiet. He dropped me off, but I could see his car across from my apartment for about half an hour before he actually left. About 5 minutes after he left, he let me know that he's home safe, and he thinks he's starting to fall for me. So naturally, I'm freaked the fuck out, because I made it clear that I didn't want anything serious, and he said he felt the same. I said to him, if that's the case, I think we should take a break from hanging out with each other. About 5 days later, he messages and asks if we can go to dinner again. He found an Italian cuisine place he knows I'll love. I tell him it's cool. He should just send me the address. He tells me that he'll pick me up. So 7 p.m. comes, he tells me he's downstairs. And as I go down to meet him, I see he's standing at my gate. I press the remote control to open the gate, and he walked inside to meet me. Show me which one is yours. I'd love to see how you live. Not hi, not how are you. That's his opening line. So now I'm naturally unsettled. I say to him that I'm starving. Could we go get dinner? And I'll show you my place at a later stage. At dinner, he gets a call again. This time, he didn't step away. I don't know. I can let you know by 10. He turns to me. Am I sleeping by you tonight? No, I don't know. I have to work tomorrow. Yeah, me too. Then back to the caller. I'll let you know, okay? I hear the caller respond. No, you are not. Can you just get your things, please? And do what with them? Take them to that girl you're seeing. I'm done asking you. Now, I am sitting here in absolute shock and terror. What in the fuck is going on here? Our food arrives, and we barely speak. I say to him, why did you ask me if you can sleep over by me? We are not spending time together like that. You know this. He then spins the story about how he just wants to hang out and again, see how I live. So I then say to him, very frankly, that I don't like having strangers in my apartment. He gets very touched, and the bill arrives. As per usual, I pay for myself. He pays for himself. I say to him, I'll get an Uber home, and he says, what's the use? I already know where you fucking live. Let me drop you off. By now, I have already decided that this will be the last time I see him. I get into his car and reach for my jumper that I threw in the back when he fetched me. I notice a bag in the back of the car full of clothes and toiletries, as well as a pillow. I don't really think much of it. I don't personally drive or own my own car, but I know my sister always has the most random shit on the back seat of her own car. On the way home, he's dead quiet, when suddenly he says, do you know how much of a selfish bitch you are? I've had no issue driving you around, but you don't want me to sleep over by you? I say to him that I've never had an issue with Ubering, and if he's so touched, I also have no issue with paying him what the Ubers would have cost me. I'm over this, and I'm not even playing nice anymore. His phone rings again. The caller says, "Your stuff is in the security room by the gate, Pete. Stay with your girlfriend or stay with your mom. You are fucked for taking advantage of everyone like this." Pete responds, "I don't speak to my mom, and you know this, you fucking bitch," and then hangs up. Now I think this may be an ex-girlfriend that he needs to collect things from. Before I have even had a chance to process what had happened, he turns to me and starts yelling at me. "I have nowhere to go. Are you fucking happy, you spoiled brat? Living off of mommy and daddy's money? Getting driven around by me like I fucking work for you, bitch?" My whole body got stiff with fear. I don't know if I'm going to cry or throw up. In my head, I'm just planning how I'm going to grab my bag the second he stops and run straight to the cafe under my apartment. If you run through the cafe, you can get to the gate that takes you to the back part of my apartment, and it works with fingerprint access. There wasn't time to still find my keys in my bag, but I didn't want the main gate I normally use to open wide enough for him to get in when I go in. He stops at my apartment, and as planned, I jump out, run into the cafe, run out the back, through the little gate, up to the second floor. My apartment was on the fourth floor, and I hammered on a neighbor's door. I went inside and told her and her husband everything that had happened, and asked if they would mind calling the cafe to explain why I ran through with no explanation and in such a state. I blocked Pete, and I haven't seen him since. I'm still not sure what his case was. From what I gathered, he was basically homeless, and I think he wanted to get into my apartment to maybe sleep over there for a while. I'm not sure if the girl that kept calling him was also a Tinder date that let him into her apartment and he just never left. All I know is that he scared the living daylights out of me, and I never ever want to fucking see him again. This happened right before the quarantine hit where I live, a couple of days before Christmas in 2009. I was home from college visiting my family, two of my three younger brothers, mom, my mom's boyfriend, Brian, and my three dogs were all at home at the time. For context, my house has a separate garage from the rest of the house that we converted to a hangout room. The rest of the house has floor to ceiling windows, so you can see the backyard from nearly any room in the house. This occurred in broad daylight, likely around 2 p.m. I had just gotten home from lunch and I was FaceTiming with my now ex-boyfriend in my room when my mom and Brian came into my room asking me if one of my friends was in the garage. Slightly confused, I said no and asked why in the fuck would my friend be in the garage, and they immediately ran out and grabbed my brother and my dogs, corralling them into the front hallway. They grabbed their phones and called the police, stating that there was a 20 to 25-year-old male, obviously drugged out, who had barricaded himself in our garage sitting on the couch watching TV. They then explained to me and my brothers that he had locked himself in the garage, gone into our refrigerator, and was eating our food and drinking my parents' wine while sitting on the couch watching daytime television. He had also grabbed a lantern, sleeping bag, and an axe from Brian's tools. Now, before the police got there, Brian grabbed a baseball bat and walked around the garage to the window. As me and my brothers watched from the window inside, he banged on the window and the gentleman inside screamed at him, "I'm waiting for my girlfriend. She'll pull up soon." and flashed the axe. Finally, the police had arrived, and they had subdued our new friend. Not much happened after that, and the police took my parents' statement and swiftly left the man in our garage. My brothers and me were okay, and quickly updated the last brother on what he had missed when he came home. In the spirit of a 12-year-old boy, he was sad that he had missed such a wild event that had occurred in our sleeping suburb. A few weeks later, the police sent my mother the information about the case, particularly the gentleman's name. My mother, the apparent super sleuth, decided to research the last name and any public criminal records of the man in our garage. While the only charges she found for this man were a few drug misdemeanors, she did find something interesting about a relative. Now this man's last name is not common and also is hyphenated, so it is appropriate to assume relation between these individuals. Apparently, the man in our garage, his father or relative, had killed a few people in a convenience store in order to celebrate his 21st birthday. Now, I know that nobody is exactly their parents or relatives, but this man was in his 20s when he broke into our garage. So it worries me that there could be some undiagnosed mental health issues in his family, and this man was clearly unstable. So to the man who broke into my garage to take an axe and watch TV, I sincerely hope that you get the help that you need. However, let's not meet again. I was probably around 16 when this happened, and I was kind of a rebellious kid. I joined Tinder to meet some older guys, and I matched with this really attractive 20-year-old that seemed really into me. Anyway, he asked to pick me up from school the following day to get ice cream and walk around a nearby lake. I said yes. He picked me up, and we had a great conversation, nothing weird, and it seemed like we were really enjoying ourselves and each other's company. We got to the lake. No one was there because it was the middle of October and cold on the water. We walked around about halfway around the lake, and that's when it got weird. He started talking to me about crime documentaries and how he had studied them and knew how to kill someone without getting caught. He started making tracks in the mud and said that he would want to wear 2 big shoes so that the police couldn't match him on shoe size. He picked up his shoe and showed me a size 10 and a half and informed me that he wore an 8. I got uneasy. He was strolling around me while I was sitting on the bench like I was prey. He went to one of those dog baggie dispensers and pulled one off. He sheathed it up to his elbow and started swatting it in my face. I thought that he might be trying to gross me out, so I was half giggling and swatting it away. One of my swats, he grabbed my forearm and pulled me in and put the bag over my head. Still, I thought he might be kidding, but as I tried to get away, I noticed he wasn't letting up. I was starting to panic now, realizing I wasn't getting any air, and he picked me up in a sort of headlock position. I was kicking and trying to elbow, and I guess one of those elbows connected to his groin, and we both fell to the ground. He laughed and said, "You got more fight in you than I thought you did. I was gonna make you pass out, but I didn't even get that far. I'm proud of you." All of my shit was in his car on the other side of the lake, so I decided to play along and pretend that it was funny. I told him I needed my inhaler now and to walk me back. He did, surprisingly. I got to his car and grabbed my taser and my phone and got the hell out of there. While we walked around the back of the car to his driver's side, I texted my mom SOS and to track my location. When I looked up from my phone, I noticed the guy had pulled out a pocket knife. He slowly laid the tip of it into my chest, just enough for it to almost pierce my skin. He stared at me with a blank expression on his face, and this went on for about a half a minute. I don't know why, but I said, "You're not gonna do it." This seemed to snap him out of it, and he paused, and then hysterically laughed. Between laughs, he got out, "That's the second time I could have killed you today." The whole drive home, he proceeded to tell me about how he would have raped and mutilated my body if I had, quote unquote, accidentally died that day. I got home and bolted out of his fucking car. As soon as I did, he sped off. I got a dick pic later that night, and then he blocked me. I looked him up, and it turns out that he was actually 27 years old and had a criminal record for domestic violence. That's all I could get of him, though. I reported it to the police, but nothing came of it, though. Probably because I wasn't willing to tell my parents what had happened. Either way, worst encounter of my life. I used to live in a real rough area. I'm talking a super low-income apartment complex in southeastern Tennessee that had been raided by the Drug Task Force and cleared out multiple times in the past. The apartment complex was pretty spread out, with a lot of roads linking them all together. This place was almost like a small village, I guess, because most people in the complex would wander around outside or sit outside their apartment, and they would just socialize or do shady shit. A lot of small meth labs, dealers, and that sort of thing. They didn't tend to have a lot of problems because of a former addict myself. I didn't tend to be the snitching or moralizing sort. As long as whatever fuckery you were up to didn't impact or involve me, I didn't really give a fuck, as long as nobody was getting actively harmed. So that's who I was. The quiet gay guy who lived with his boyfriend and 4 cats, who didn't fuck with anybody, but on the few incidents I'd be fucked with, I'd been known to not back down, so I wasn't often fucked with. People who also didn't tend to start shit with each other there, mostly just outsiders, and while I didn't make friends, I was at least a known member of the community as I lived there for about 2 years. I did not have the option to move out. I was poor as hell, and between me and my ex, I was the only one working. I was able to keep up with us and the cats fed and bills paid, but that was literally it, and sometimes I struggled to do that. At least the bills part. Can't say any of us ever went hungry, even if what we were eating was low-grade shit. I drove a shitty old 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee at the time. This vehicle was such a piece of shit that every time I got into it and turned the key, I'd pray to God, hoping that this wasn't the day that it finally stopped working. The vehicle had a ton of problems, some of which I managed to fix on my own, others not so much. That said, it was my lifeline, the only way I had to get to work. I'm not quite sure how this happened, but somehow word got around that I was trying to sell my Jeep. This was obviously not true because I needed the damn thing and knew it wasn't worth enough to sell in order to assure I could buy another vehicle. Nonetheless, I started having people approach me about it, offering me painfully low sums of money before I'd turn them away. I tried my damnedest to kill the for sale rumor, but it persisted up until the day I moved out of state and never looked back. So, one night, toward the end of my tenure at the complex after me and my ex had split and he moved out, I was alone and gaming on my PC. I believe I was playing Tekken. I heard a loud, frantic series of knocks at my front door. These apartments were small and shitty, so it was within visible eyesight of my bed in the bedroom, and this dude was knocking loudly. I get up, already stretched out because of the hour, and grabbed the knife I had and looked through the peephole. I could not really see anything because it was so dark, so I talked through the door. I asked who it was and what they wanted in a commanding, almost aggressive tone because I wasn't trying to look vulnerable. For reference, I'm just under 6 foot, around 220 pounds. I'm by no means small or weak. That said, I'm also not a one-man army or some kind of badass. I'm just as human as anyone else, and while I'm not one to run away from a fight, I'm also not the idiotic type to run towards them. I heard nothing at first, so I asked again. Nothing again. I stood there, trying to listen for a few minutes before returning to the bedroom, and a few minutes later, I heard the knocking start once again. This time, I went to my window to see if I could see anyone outside at all, and I saw several shadows lurking near my Jeep, parked just outside. Now, at this point, I was worried that they were going to try to break into it or steal it, so this time I actually opened the door. Standing in the little alley thing in front of my door was a group of 3 individuals. I only recognized one, who was standing in front of the other 2. I'd seen him around the complex and knew he lived there. I'm still packing the knife, but I'm not brandishing it at this point. I asked again what he wants and what the hell these people are doing knocking on my door at 1 a.m. and lingering around my Jeep. He said he heard it was for sale and he wanted to buy it, offering me the pitiful amount of money he had on him. Legit, like $30 for it, and said him and his boys were just checking it out. I told him, look man, the Jeep isn't for sale. I don't know what the fuck you heard. And even if the Jeep was for sale, I wouldn't sell it to you for $30 fucking dollars. Now please, get the fuck off my property. After this, he gestured for his buddies to come over, and now I had 3 people standing shoulder to shoulder in the hallway leading up to my door, doing their best to intimidate me, before the guy asked in a real fucked up tone, "You sure about that, boy?" Before I said, "Yeah, the fuck I am." After which I revealed the knife and ejected the blade from the handle. This was a larger knife with full brass knuckle guards and spike at the bottom of them. Not your typical small pocket knife by any means. His response to this was to call me a pussy for bringing out a weapon, to which I responded something along the lines of, "Says the motherfucker who comes here 3 deep," to which he just laughed at me. The sight of the knife did not put him off at all. I guess he figured I'd be too scared to use it, and that they could rush me before I got the chance. When I saw them inching their way forward, I sprung into action and started wildly thrusting and slashing the blade around in their general direction with wild abandonment, showing I had 0 issues with potentially killing or injuring all of them. I knew I was not likely to win a 3-on-1 fight, even with a knife, but I made it goddamn clear that if I was going down, I was taking at least one of them with me. They backed up and started spewing shit talk at me, including calling me a faggot and other choice words. I was known to be gay, even if most people act surprised when I tell them. I kept moving towards them as they backed up, showing that at this point they either were going to leave or someone was going to get stabbed By the time I got to the end of the hallway, to the lot where my Jeep was parked, I noticed 2 more people standing by the Jeep and internally swore at myself for just not going back inside. But I was in too deep now. At this point, I went all in and started yelling at the top of my lungs, acting like a bloodthirsty lunatic who was just out to hurt people in a similar manner to how people try to scare bears away. I was just trying to be as loud and as threatening as possible to really sell the idea that even if they took me out, at least one of them might end up dead as a result. And to be honest, I fully intended for it to go that way if the shit popped off. One of the guys by my Jeeps then brandished what looked to be a piece of wood at me as a threat, to which I responded, "Come at me with that stick and I'll slit your goddamn throat, you stupid motherfucker." I remember saying this very well because one of the other guys thought it was the funniest shit in the world and started laughing, not in a "you won't do it" sort of way, but in a manner that seemed like I was genuinely entertaining him. I was so hyped on adrenaline, my response to this was to slash at him, as he was one of the closer ones to me, at which he swore at me before running off, and all the rest followed suit. After this, I went back inside and stayed awake until sunrise to make sure that they did not come back before finally falling asleep on the couch by the door, so I could hear if anything else happened outside and hopefully wake up if it did. Nothing more happened, and the next day after, I saw the guy who initialized the standoff with me as I was getting home from work. He followed me up to my apartment where I parked and apologized for what had happened. He said he was high at the time and also drunk, so he was feeling extra stupid. I told him not to fucking do it again. He then quickly approached me and hugged me in this real bro sort of way. I went along with it and told him to have a nice day before going back inside and settling down. I had no more incidences with him and his buddies ever again after this. Even though I played it off as not caring, it was mostly just to avoid further conflict. So, to the whacked out meth head and his friends who decided it was all in their best interest to intimidate me into selling my vehicle for $30, let's definitely not ever fucking meet again.
Please don't kill me. I have a lot to live for. I have a wife and kids.
If you are new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.